a worthwhile moment to talk about sort of what is a regressive tax in of itself. So I know that I've sort of asked like 8 different questions here, um,
That's
but
cool.
they
I
are,
think I got him. I think I got him right here.
yeah,
So I'll work backwards. I totally agree with you about regressive versus progressive taxes. And it's something a lot of people do not understand. And it's really important for people to understand that at the end of the day, the question is how much of your total income is going towards taxation. And with property taxes, I did the math. I made a spreadsheet for the whole state and compared the average property tax bill in terms of what was going towards public education to the average income. And it's very clear from the data that the more money you make, the chances are you pay less towards, as a percentage of your income, towards public education. And if you make, I think it was over $100,000, you're most likely to pay in the bottom half of property taxes. So it's clear that our system of taxation right now is regressive, with the poorer towns are paying the most of their income, the richer towns are paying the least. I mean, if you go and look, there's someone who's running for CD1. I won't say her name. She has a house in Newcastle. It's worth $3.5 million. Her taxes are $6,000 a year. My taxes for my 1,400 square foot house in Newmarket that's worth probably $400,000 is $8,000 a year. So right there, you can see these discrepancies from town to town. Now, my idea with taxation is that I don't want to prescribe the solution. And the reason I don't want to is that we've had a couple of solutions brought forward as ways to fund education. Statewide education property tax was basically what they settled with. It didn't really work out because the donor towns didn't want to pay it, so now they keep it. But my point is that I want to have a series of forums around the state and come to a conclusion as to what is the best tax to go forward with. And in the meantime, there's some little things we can do to raise revenue, such as if we go back to the business profit taxes that we were raising or the levels that we're raising in 2015, 2016, that would raise $100 million a year. For instance, like rooms and meals was dropped from 9 to 8.5%, which is really not a lot of money for any one restaurant, but on the aggregate is tens of millions of dollars. Obviously, we could legalize cannabis to bring in some more revenue. And then I really want to get into taxing wealth as opposed to income. And the reason that I want to do that, or that is my preferred method, and figuring that out is a little bit tricky, obviously. But like we had a really good tax. The interest and dividends tax only hit people that were making over, I think it was $250,000 a year, most of them. And that was a really good wealth, tax on the rich because it was, interest and dividends on investments. It was a good tax for New Hampshire. And it was bringing in $100+ million a year. So we could bring that one back. But the issue I have with an income tax is that going forward, as I said before, robots, AI, automation are going to be taking more jobs, right? So more and more people are not going to have an income. And same with a sales tax. If 30% of the population in a decade is unemployed, they're not going to be having any money to buy anything. Like we're going to have to completely restructure our entire thought process about what the government does and how it does it, because otherwise 30-40% of the population is going to be unemployed in the next 10 years. And I think most people just really cannot grasp how cataclysmic that change is going to be. And getting back to the idea of state-funded housing, we're going to have to do that. There's not going to be an option for not doing that. And like right now, our New Hampshire Housing Authority does a pretty good job of creating housing for people with low incomes. Portsmouth in particular has built like 1,000+ units. They've done a pretty good job, and I think that that's a formula that we can work on. I'm not entirely, I'm not stuck on one form of housing. Tiny houses is one idea, but I think that the trick is we're going to need to present every town with a lot of ideas in every city and say, these are the ideas. If you don't want the housing over here, because, and this has happened in Durham where they didn't want to put they didn't want to allow a development in because the land was really good agricultural land. And they said, we should save this. And I was like, well, it's not really being used for a farm. Like if you have good agricultural land, we should require that to be used as a farm if it's not going to be housing. And if not here, where? And to your point, maybe it would be better to build a 6-story building in Durham that would house 30 people or 40 people, as opposed to building a 40-acre, development that's going to be taking up a lot more space, especially as the baby boomers are going to be in need of, different type of housing. 80% of baby boomers are living in houses that they will not be able to retire in, but they're sort of stuck in them because of the interest rates. Right. And this is a really complex problem that I frankly am not going to say I have the perfect solutions for, but behind me, there's an old Catholic school that it's a lovely brick building, and it houses probably 30 or 40 people. It doesn't take up very much space, and it's fundamentally, it's a pretty building, it's not architecturally ugly. And one frustrating thing about the whole downtown of Newmarket is that based on current zoning laws, you could not build any of the houses or any of the buildings that are here because they're too close to the road. They don't have, I think it's maybe you need 5 feet on either side. And all
gotta love those setbacks.
And so I think just having some, one simple idea zoning wise would be, whatever the highest building in your downtown right now should be the height limit, and there should not even be a question of that. And for some towns, this is why I like the tiny house idea, because if you can put a tiny house in someone's backyard, like an ADU, you haven't had to duplicate services. You don't have to put in another water pipe or another sewage pipe. You can connect the existing infrastructure. And the other thing that we've got to keep in mind is that we've got a housing problem for the next 10 to 20 years. And then by 2040, the population of New Hampshire, if we don't, it starts to go down. So we could very easily, and this is, I think, I don't think this is the argument the NIMBYs are making, but I think it is a valid argument, which is, let's not build a bunch of ugly housing that we're not going to need in 10 or 20 years. Let's build the housing that we need, which I used to be against these 50 plus buildings because I'm like, why are we building more housing for 50 plus? But if the people in New Hampshire are moving from their 2,000 square foot 3-bedroom to a 50 plus community, and that house is now for sale for a family, that's the flow that we need to have that we're not having now. Right. And I think one thing that's also important to note is I've been looking for a house for 7 years. I live in this apartment, above my restaurant. I live in downtown, but me and my girlfriend have been looking for a house. She wants more kids, blah, blah. I will say in the last 3 months or even 6 weeks, I've seen more affordable housing in my area than I haven't seen since 2019. There's 3 houses right now that are less than an hour from me in New Hampshire, 40 minutes away, that are under 300,000. I don't even want to tell you where they are because otherwise they're going to get sold.
Yeah, they get snatched up right quick.
And these aren't ugly houses. They're not trailers. They're decent. They're small lots, 1,200 square foot, 1,400 square foot. But I'm kind of thinking that we're in the housing market is crashing in other parts of the country. And it was funny because I said to my girlfriend, because I'm looking at the news, and I'm like, oh, wow, Florida's housing prices are basically cratering for a number of reasons, like overdevelopment, but also they're having trouble getting insurance and all these different things. Yep. And it was funny because my sister, I was talking to her last night, and she said, 2 of our son's classmates from last year both moved to Florida during the summer. And I was like, I wonder if they found a house for $250 in Cape Coral, and we're screw it, let's move down there. And so I think we're in a little bit of a fluctuation period with the housing, but I think fundamentally that the government should always be making a priority of housing. And one thing I found out with my research was, before, in the lead up to World War I, the United States created, I think it was the United States Housing Corporation, because they needed a bunch of housing around these factories that were building the munitions for World War I. Right. And so they built these beautiful neighborhoods and just architecturally brilliant. They had the best people doing it. And so it's not unprecedented for the state to be building housing. And, in terms of the homeless, I think that we need immediate emergency intervention, such as, like I said, state sanctioned camping, or even state sanctioned RV parking, I think would be really big, because you've got an RV, you've got a bunch of them for sale. You go on Craigslist, you can buy, there's tons of RVs for really cheap. If you could get those hooked up to food or water and sewage, you could put those in a parking lot, bam, you've now got housing for 20 people for very little money.
Right.
Now, again, this is not a permanent solution. I would like to see more single room occupancies built. When I was in Manchester, in my campaign office last time I was in Manchester, and we were paying $400 for a decent sized room in an office building. And there was really no one else on our floor. There was a few people, but it was pretty empty. But it had a couple bathrooms in it. And at one point, somebody that was homeless, I think, just figured out that they could go in there and there was a bathroom, and they were sleeping in one of the office spaces. And I was like, better him sleeping there. There's a bathroom,
Right.
If you had a communal kitchen in one of these office spaces, you could have 20 people living here for probably like $5,000 a month, and we were talking to the homeless people that were living in Veterans Park. And like, one of the things I think that people need to realize too, is there's really like a couple different types of people that are living unhoused. And there's one type who's been out there for maybe a decade, maybe longer. And they might have some substance abuse issues that they basically have acquired from being homeless. It's not like they were doing meth and then became homeless. It was like they became homeless because of a medical injury, and then figured out, hey, if you smoke meth at night, you won't go to sleep and no one can steal your stuff. And I heard that story a lot. And then there's people out there who's maybe 65, somebody's grandpa, and the rent just got too high. Their family doesn't live around here, and they don't have a substance abuse problem, and they could be put into housing tomorrow and be fine. But there's other people who have been living on the streets so long that they will get into housing and sometimes literally just leave because they miss the community that they had of living with 20 or 30 people in a tent village. Yeah. And this is kind of something that dawned on me, is people living in tents is what we did for thousands and thousands of years, in groups, in tents. And I think some of these people are finding that community they cannot replicate in a single room apartment. And maybe the smarter thing to do would be to go to a community. And like, I talked to this group of people, it was probably 30 or 40 guys. Some of them were even working, but they're doing a lot of sitting around drinking in the park because they had nothing else to do. Most of them had some sort of physical injury, or a lot of them were veterans or whatever. But there was a couple of them that were kind of like running the show a little bit. They would keep an eye on everybody, and they'd be like, hey, somebody watch that guy's stuff. He's going to the bathroom. Oh, Tommy's going to go buy cigs. Here's some money, Tom, And if you could find those people and like be like, look, we want to bring your whole community into this apartment building, or, into this little tent village we're going to make, or even, your village we're going to make, so that you guys are still together and you can watch out.
You're functionally raising the quality of life for that group of people that would just be there. It's like they've established a community for themselves. And if you just give them a better space or infrastructure, that it's not like they won't leave that space because they miss their community. That's the idea.
Right. And then if you say to them, hey, look, if you guys can police yourselves, in the terms of like keeping the place clean, and like, and then you sort of have to have, and this is kind of funny thing that happened in Manchester, is all the alcoholics are in one park and all the drug addicts are in a different park because they don't get along, which is kind of an interesting idea. They've chosen to self-select away from each other, probably because they just get in fights otherwise. Sure. But if then you could keep, basically, you're going to have some places that are going to be substance free and some places that are not. Because obviously, if someone's trying to get off of whatever drugs, they need to be away from people that are doing drugs. But you're going to have people that are doing drugs, so they need to be given space and sort of say, like, here's the resources, but like, we can help you get off of your opioid addiction, but you still need to be housed in the meantime. And I think the argument to be made there, and this is what's so important, is like, I think frequently Democrats want to make these humanitarian arguments about everything. Oh, we've got to save the homeless people because we're good people and blah, blah. The Republicans don't give a shit about that argument. But what does make sense to the Republicans is it doesn't make fiscal sense what you're doing. When we have to send the fire department out there, we have to send the ambulance out there, when these people are making our parks so we physically don't want to go in them. Like, why have we just seeded parks? Just given up on the parks in Manchester, as opposed to saying, let's help these people find housing so that we can enjoy our parks again. There's a fiscal, there was a study in Phoenix, Arizona. This was several years ago, where they figured out that there was basically 10 chronically homeless people in Phoenix that were costing the city millions of dollars in just ER visits. There was one guy that had cost the city $1 million because he'd get drunk, he'd fall over, whatever, he'd be out in the elements. And they figured out, hey, if we house these 20 or 30 people and just have a nurse that's going to check on them once a week, a social worker is going to knock on the door, every couple
It
days.
just straight up costs less.
It just costs less. You know what I mean? And so that's what the argument I always try to make, because the Democrats preach to the choir and I want to preach to the Republican leaning independent and say, hey, this thing that's also good for the economy, this thing that's good for the environment or good for someone's health and welfare is also good for your bottom line. And so let's pursue that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm actually running out of time here, so unfortunately, we're gonna have to call it for today. I mean, I could keep going with you on a whole bunch of different things for a while, but John, it was a real pleasure to have you on today, and I'm
thanks so much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. I'm glad that you were able to sort of entertain some of my more pointy questions here, because I know some of this stuff gets a little radioactive for political candidates and people that are trying to put themselves out there. So, yeah, significant appreciation on my part for your willingness to sort of engage.
Thank you. It's been fun. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. I will catch up with you soon, I hope. And yeah, so thank you so much.
All right, I'll see you.
Take care. And that's been John Kuiper. Candidate for governor. He's thinking about whether or not he wants to stay independent or go Democratic, as we just heard. But it is something to sort of look at, and I think he's got some interesting perspectives, and he's taken a new approach that is worth considering for folks. So if you enjoyed this interview, please subscribe to the channel. You can support us on Patreon, patreon.com/locally sourced. And that's been it for today. We'll catch up with you guys next time. Thanks so much.
Hey ho, let's go. Coming to you live from the 102.3 WHIV FM studios in New Orleans, Louisiana, where brass bands and public health both know how to make some noise. Welcome to Noise Filter, where we cut through the static and serve you what's really happening in public health. Simply. So today's hot topic. Imagine you pop into the ER for a bum ankle or some mysterious stomach drama, and the nurse says, hey, while you're here, want to catch up on your vaccines? Sounds like a fever dream, right? Well, it's reality, and the data says that it's a pretty smart one. All right, well, let's hear about this. A sweeping new study that was published in the CDC's Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report surveyed over 3,000 adults in 10 ERs across 5 states. And forget Dr. Google, where 90% were missing at least one recommended vaccine, and almost half haven't even heard of all the shots they ought to have. We're talking about basics like tetanus, pneumonia, RSV, and the ever-present influenza, critical shields needed in our germ-ridden world. Now, here's the twist that'll make your public health heart skip a beat. Among folks behind on vaccines, nearly half were perfectly happy to get vaccinated while in the ER. And if offered all of their missing shots at once, nearly 87% said, roll up my sleeve, let's do it. So much for vaccine hesitancy. Sometimes it's just about missed chances, not missing trust. Why does this matter? Well, millions of Americans only get their care in the ER, especially uninsured, underinsured, and unseen populations. For many, it's the only health system doorway that's open, and traditional reminders from primary care never actually reach them. So giving them shots in the ER could potentially more than triple up-to-date vaccine rates from just 14% to a hearty 48%. That's not just a shot in the arm, it's a shot at public health equity. Researchers say that top barriers are simply lack of knowledge and lack of offers. And the solution being the provider and the needle to wherever people show up. No appointment necessary. If an ER visit can end up with a patched up wrist and a fresh tetanus shot, why not let people leave healthier on the inside and the outside? Public health officials are taking notes. They see the ER as a powerhouse for nudging vaccination rates amongst those that are left out of routine prevention, automated screening, partnerships with community clinics, and even digital reminders could someday make the ER a one-stop shop for urgent care and prevention. So, the next time you find yourself visiting in the ER, don't just count the ceiling tiles. Ask what vaccines you're missing. Who knows? You might leave with a patched up knee, a boosted immune system, and a killer sticker for that boot. Remember, here at Noise Filter, we believe that sometimes the best shot at protecting the public comes when you least expect it. So stay noisy, stay protected, and if life knocks you down, make sure you get up to date, one bandage and one vaccine at a time.
Hi, and welcome to Political Coffeehouse or Environmental Coffeehouse. That's me, Sandy Shellis, and I've got a great show today on this wonderful platform, This Space TV, and our channel, because not only me on Environmental Coffeehouse, Nicholas, Antonio, and Jim. Jennifer has retired, but welcome. And I'm so very happy to have you guys. Today's topic is kind of piggybacking off last week. My first show last week, we talked about data centers, energy, but today is about energy. Today, I'm talking about Chris Wright, the fracker in chief at the Department of Energy in the United States. He's full of a lot of bullshit. We're going to talk about that. I've figured out how to show some videos. Let's see how this looks. Meet him, Chris Wright, the oil oligarch. He donated lots of money to Donald Trump, and he was appointed the energy secretary. He's rich off of oil, and he really doesn't like climate solutions at all. He's just not the kind of person that we love. And hi, Alex. Alex, I can't flush it because this is not my platform. I have no flushing sound effects right now. But let me get started on talking about him. Energy, because he talks about adding 100 gigawatts of energy that we're going to need to power our world coming up. But first I want to talk about him. He is... he's the Energy Department fracking in chief. He was born in 65 in Colorado. He studied mechanical engineering. He's got a BS from MIT. He did graduate studies in electrical engineering, but he is not a climate scientist. And he has mechanical engineering. So I don't know how much energy, except for his experience. And he founded Pinnacle Technologies in 92. They were the company that pioneered hydraulic fracking, the mapping. It was very important technology, for shale gas. I mean, we all saw it happen. We all watched it happen, mostly under the Obama administration, which was insane, really, because we thought we were heading for peak oil. We thought we were going to reach that awful spot where we weren't, at the time, awful. But well, that's what he did. And he was also the chairman of Stroud Energy, another early shale producer. He also then went to 2011, founded Liberty Energy. So he's the fracking guy. He's the oil guy. He is definitely that guy. He was nominated on November 16th, 2024. And so we're going to talk about him. We're going to talk about energy. We're also going to talk about who voted for him. Democrats specifically, who did. So we'll get there because I have videos. We're going to talk about CO2. We're going to show a few things that he has said, he has done, because he's been all over television. He's been everywhere. He's been on CNBC and he's been on Bloomberg, all the business channels, lying about everything. And he pushes everything that favors fossil fuel, natural gas and oil. And he doesn't want he wants to reduce the regulatory burdens, which is happening. That's what is happening. So what I want to do is tell you what he does. He's the kind of guy that he misrepresents and he cherry picks all this research. And scientists have not been happy with a lot of what he's done. I mean, he was very much supportive of that energy report that I talked about in my last show on our channel. Just on an Environmental Coffeehouse, the bullshit report that came from Judith Curry, Roy Spencer, the lovely Heartland Institute backed Heritage Foundation fossil fuel people that wrote that report. And there were so many people that were upset, scientists. But he misrepresents parts of the IPCC reports and other science reports. They've pushed back. They say he oversimplifies findings. Now, I have a lot of notes, so, bear with me. He simplifies findings. He omits context. Like he says, the fall example, and this is when I found that. He says the attributing fall in cold weather deaths solely to global warming, ignoring other factors like improvements in heating infrastructure health. He ignores evidence of increasing frequency or intensity of weather extremes, which is really insane. He downplays the link between climate change and observed damage, which is wildfires, droughts, floods all over the world. If you had watched my last show, I did a lot on the people in the administration, but I didn't zero in on him, which I thought was a great way to do this show because it then does piggyback onto what I did about data centers, because it's all about energy. He's really, I don't know if we would say he's outright a denier, saying it's not happening. He just twists the facts. It's happening. We all know it's happening. Watch my channel, 9 years of doing it. He actually said in the Senate hearings that wildfires are hype, or that their increased severity, it's not clearly connected to climate change. Many scientists dispute this totally, because studies show that climate change is making fires more likely, more intense. It's drying the vegetation. It's increasing temperature. It's changing the precipitation patterns, which I can tell you we're living through a drought. We just got rain yesterday. He uses data that show earlier peaks in wildfire areas burned long ago to argue that current fires are not unprecedented. So he's just, the scientists that we follow and the IPCC scientists, they say he ignores changes in land use, climate factors like forest management, and then that climate realism. Okay, there is a Heartland Institute newsletter. That's why I don't use climate realist at all, because we might think we are, but they have hijacked the term, and it is they think there's even a newsletter called Climate Realism, and it rebrands, skepticism, and it's dangerous. So he uses that language because he just doesn't want, he wants what he wants. He's a nuclear guy, loves nuclear energy. So I'd say the concern is by emphasizing the cost. It's always about the money, the cost, the trade-off, skepticism about extreme weather. He provides cover for slower transitions off of fossil fuels, which we know really has to happen. So I'm going to play one video of him that I have up here. I only have one, and I'm going to add this one. All right, let's watch it.
What do you want to say to Al Gore and the skeptics on this?
So Al Gore's nonsense is exactly what got us in this position.
Nonsense.
He started peddling climate nonsense 20 years ago. The Arctic was going to have no ice anymore 10 years ago. Well, this year we had well more ice than we had 10 years ago in the Arctic. He just started to peddle this nonsense. The world was going to heck, but no problem, with lots of government money, we can change the energy system. Well, $5 trillion of global expenditure later, and congratulations, wind, solar, and batteries are almost to 3% of global energy. And everywhere they've had high penetration, more expensive prices. A complete train wreck. And Al Gore, like most people that peddle nonsense, doesn't recant. He's just doubling down on this stuff. But that's why I'm going to New York. That's why the president's going to address the United Nations General Assembly. We're just trying to bring back common sense. Get people to talk about what we actually know about climate change, a slow-moving, gradual phenomenon, nowhere near a crisis or a disaster, and the facts that our efforts so far to displace hydrocarbons in the energy chain have been just wildly unsuccessful. Let's be a little smarter about it. Let's focus on the things that can actually move the needle, which is basically natural gas and nuclear. Those are the needle movers we could have if you really wanted to reduce greenhouse gas emissions.
And do you?
All right, I got one more.
The funny thing is, I predict in a few years, President Trump will win the Climate Hero Award because his policies, which is pro-natural gas and pro-nuclear, those are the only two needle movers we have today to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. He's not doing it for that reason. You're right. That's nowhere near our biggest issue.
Let's get the plastic out of the ocean. Leave the CO2. It's a longer conversation.
Leave the CO2. That's what they say. Leave the CO2. They don't want to talk about CO2. Well, we do. We absolutely do. He's publicly disputing established scientific consensus. He's downplaying the threats. It's very dangerous game. He undermines public trust in climate science, and he also dampens the urgency with which the U.S. and policy and society respond. So we watched the orange turd, Donald Trump, speak at the UN and make a laughing stock out of the U.S., embarrass the U.S. with his putting down of everything renewable. Now, I have issues with all energy, okay? But I would personally rather have a battery or solar or wind, because the use of fossil fuels is up front. And then when you have your solar panels on, you no longer are using or burning And I think everything should be retrofitted. We should nationalize energy. That's how I feel. Of course, that's the commie libtard view. Yeah, but it's really democratic socialism that I think would really be very important in this era. But it's not going to happen in this administration. Absolutely not. He talks about energy, reliable energy, rejecting clean versus dirty framing. I'd say I don't like that, quite frankly, but he stresses trade-offs or policies for climate are regressive. Well, hurting poor people? How about helping poor people? How about helping people in the United States get these things done? How about that? And really, it's the CO2 argument that I can't stand, because it's ridiculous saying that CO2 is great for plants. And I do have a couple of videos I'm going to play for you. But he's got conflict of interests with all of his fracking and Liberty Energy and environmental groups. They worry that his regulatory decisions, well, they will favor the fossil fuel industry. They will favor expansion over emissions reductions. Hang on. So, of course, he's going to favor technology that benefits companies that he used to be involved in, because this administration is corrupt every which way. So they don't see any of this. Who knows? Like Holman's bribes, did nothing wrong. There's nothing that's not corrupt about this. He's scaling back. He's going to stop the green energy programs that were starting. And a lot of people will disagree and say, well, I know that there's a controversy. I know that mining, like in Thacker Pass in the desert, that Max Wilbert fought against because of the lithium mining, it is destructive. Is there a better way? There has to be. There will be eventually. That's how technology works. We are not going to fight it. And I mean, I like to think that I am a deep green ecologist, but I'm also a person that understands where we are in this 2025. This is where we are. Technology is leading the way. We can't really fight it. We can't say, well, we don't want it. We want to go back to being what? Hunter-gatherers? That ain't going to happen. There's not enough animals for 8 billion people if we're going to go out and hunt and gather. So he wants to reverse those climate policies and lock in more infrastructure, a lot more infrastructure. And then he says, okay, it's reliable. And that wind and solar aren't, but I can't see. For example, my power went out just the other day. Goes out a lot here. I am on the grid. We are 100% carbon neutral where I live. It is hydropower. Yes, of course, there's environmental degradation or damage from it. But the energy at my house is not burning carbon. And my backup battery I used the other day. It's not a stinky generator, because you never know. It was 2 hours, but you never know. I have an EcoFlow, a Delta EcoFlow, which will power some lights, refrigerator, backup stuff. But food, I worry about my food. I have a lot of things in the freezer. I'm a storing person. Besides canning, it's freezing, it's shrink wrapping, it's drying, it's all kinds of things. So if my power goes out, I need a backup so I don't lose things. And it's not just about comfort, but I am that person. I do have an all electric, for the most part, home. And, but he really does. I mean, scientists that he has quoted said he misuses or he oversimplifies their results. And it's not just a political pushback. It's about factual changes, factual claims. He's canceling green funding, which I think is ridiculous, even though we do have to find better ways. Like I said, I would love to say or be a deep green ecologist. I would love to see us deindustrialize. I really was a proponent of degrowth, but it ain't going to happen, like Elliot and Sam say. If you know the channels I'm talking about, Climate Casino, Elliot Jacobson, which I do have a clip from our last show together, and but it isn't going to happen. So we have to be in the now where we are, and we are here. He maybe said climate change is real, but so I don't know if I want to say he's completely a denier, but storms and sea level rise, all these things are happening. All he has to do is look at a Volcaholic video on X to see the damage that's happening all over the world that is not as usual, although he wants business as usual and even more. So he downplays it. He totally downplays it. And he says, we are not in the midst of an energy transition. Now, I want to pull up my notes on the energy that we will need. He says we're going to need 100 gigawatts. It's an enormous amount of power. And here, let me move over. I have to move over my screen. You can't see it, but I have to make it a little bit better. I had paper and everything, but you know what? It's very hard. I have notes and everything all over, but so it represents the capacity of large scale, big. It's a lot, 100 gigawatts. And it is the measure of instantaneous power, not total energy. So its real world impact depends on how long it's generated. So what's a gigawatt? We start with just get a little power thing going. Gigawatt is equal to 1 billion watts or 1,000 megawatts. For comparison, a single incandescent light bulb uses between 40 and 100 watts. One large nuclear power plant might generate about 1 gigawatt of power. So how do you contextualize 100 gigawatts that we're going to need? He says, to understand the scale of 100 gigawatts, it can be compared to the output of real world energy infrastructure and demand, powering homes and populations. 100 gigawatts of utility scale solar capacity is enough to power approximately 22 million homes. Now, I don't know what the degradation would be of the environment. It would probably be significant. It is. I've shown videos of these mines, and it is cringeworthy. But then there's, then you look at all the oil wells and the machines, the oil, whatever you call them. I don't know what you call them, but all over. And then somebody had said in the comments earlier about Texas and all the wind energy that Texas has, even though the orange turd hates wind, is canceling wind projects. And it's sad. I can deal with wind better than solar farms, actually, but that's because I feel that, again, I'll repeat it. Energy in the U.S. should be nationalized. Our government, instead of giving $20 billion to Argentina to bail out libertarian idiot down there, right-wing fascist moron Milei and his mismanagement, that's $20 billion that could be used to help poor people retrofit their homes, or landlords retrofit their places for renewable energies, for energies that don't burn carbon. But no, we're going to do that. And I don't even get me started on health insurance. So 100 gigawatts, 22 million homes, 100 gigawatts of total wind power capacity. It did exist in as late as 2019. It did. In the total solar photovoltaic capacity in the U.S. surpassed 100 gigawatts in the first quarter of 2024, which was also the hottest year on recorded record. They don't talk about that. Mm-mm. And I know a lot of you out there understand a lot of this, and probably if I make an error or whatever, please correct me, but do it on, privately, write me a note, and then I can then adjust or fix what I may misquote here. Cause I pulled together a lot of stuff. A major portion of our country's energy mix, 100 gigawatts, is a significant share of a country, but I'll use the US because that's what we're talking about. Some energy analysts in 2020 projected that the US would need 100 gigawatts of energy storage by 2030 to meet clean energy goals. Okay. One of the things that Wright doesn't talk about, he talks about solar. He doesn't talk about storage of energy in the batteries. He never talks about that, which is what I have with my EcoFlow battery, which is so much better than a stinky generator, which I have in a cart and I can wheel it around the upstairs of my house, and I have the solar panels for that. Early as 2025, corporate energy buyers had cumulatively purchased 100 gigawatts of renewable energy since 2014, demonstrating the demand for power at this scale. People like it. A lot of people do like it because it doesn't stink. You're not breathing in. Millions of people die from respiratory illnesses from emissions from burning fossil fuels. And then, of course, there's the data centers, which I did the whole show on. And that is going to increase by over 100 gigawatts between 2024 or 2020, and 2035, illustrating those massive energy requirements of that technical infrastructure, which, again, we might not love all this. We can't fight it. We need to learn about it. We need to understand. Watch my show on data. Watch my show on the administration, on the, I've talked about the Arctic ad nauseum. We have so many things. So power versus energy, you have to distinguish between power and energy. Power in the gigawatts is the rate at which the energy is produced or consumed, like the speed of a car. And energy, which is the gigawatt hours, is the total amount of power produced or consumed over time, like the distance a car travels. So 100 gigawatts of power generated over a full year, which is 8,760 hours, would equal 876,000 gigawatts of energy. 100 gigawatts times the 8,760 hours a year. We are an energy hungry country. We are probably at the top. I'd say. I don't have the data pulled up for that. I did not do that. So he has said that there's no climate crisis. Okay. But what does the science say? The science says IPCC AR6. What does it say? Human influence has warmed the climate. Global surface temperature will continue to rise unless deep CO2 and greenhouse gas cuts occur. The report, which is the report, the IPCC report, which we have talked about on our channel and criticized also, because sometimes it may not be as strong as it should be about the danger we are in on this planet. The report, it's going to continue to rise, and I have a graphic on that, but we'll do it. I'll show the little video with Elliot and you'll see. So the IPCC report AR6, it warns the widespread, sometimes irreversible impacts, and says limiting warming requires rapid emission reductions now, which we are not doing. We didn't do under the Biden administration either. It's just going up and up. The science treats this as a crisis of risk management and systems resilience That's in the IPCC. But this fracker in chief, his phrasing minimizes risk and policy urgency. Yeah? Has he spoken to the insurance industry? The IPCC treats current warming and projected impacts as serious, actionable emergency, requiring policy choices now, which we're not going to get in the United States. Although companies like EcoFlow are manufacturing batteries for people that like this, like me. Miss Jevons paradox. I will use more energy because as energy efficiency increases, you use more. That's the simplistic way of saying it, but I'm probably using more energy. Although, like I said, if I use the solar panels, the sun charges my battery. The upfront use of fossil fuels is done. I have it, I use it. And then he says that the no clean versus dirty framing to argue trade-offs matter, and the policy shouldn't punish fossil fuels while he ignores their role in lifting living standards. He emphasizes energy reliability and cost. All right. Sure. But science and energy analysis. It's true. Every energy source has impacts, like I say, and the upfront impacts of mining and getting lithium and all those things. It is not pretty at all. It is not pretty. But the life cycle analysis show renewable electricity, wind, solar storage emit far less CO2 per kilowatt hour than fossil fuels. And rapid deployment of low carbon tech is central to meeting the climate goals, which I believe in, even if they are detrimental in another way to the planet. Because again, it's very hard. There's no energy that's not going to be detrimental. It's just it's the cost benefit analysis. But these people are all just greedy. They're just greedy. So the bottom line is actually, to me, is that it's a truth. And to meet the IPCC pathways, we really need to do this all over the world. Other countries are doing it. You know, when they always talk about China and the coal use, they never show you, which I don't really like. And I did have a picture, but I'm not going to show you, of the solar panels that China's got blanketing all this area. And that's, to me also, that's another it is a problem to me for wildlife and environment and ecology. And it could be done differently, but that's for another show. And possibly maybe next week, that's what I'll take up, how that can be done. Yeah. So he's got industry ties and conflict of interests. Definitely. You think? Absolutely. So energy policy, it shapes which infrastructure gets built. And we need to choose. So they're going to choose in this administration, excuse me. I don't know, maybe my fan is making me have an itchy nose, but they're going to choose, and they're going to prioritize fossil fuel expansion. And it's going to lock in decades of emissions, which is called the carbon lock-in, and really reduces the chance of meeting the IPCC pathways when we're not even in the Paris Agreement. Orange sure took us out. So it's really a conundrum because, you know, it's very easy for me to say, hey, we are WASF, figure it out. This administration, and I call, between Chris Wright and Lee Zeldin, I call them the near-term human extinction administrators. They are. They're just ushering in more heartache and more death for the planet. Even worse. Even worse. So he just there's not going to be rapid decarbonization. It's a joke. It's not going to happen. And it's unfortunate. I would have liked to see it happen, but I would have liked to see it happen while also educating people about what overshoot is, overshooting the planetary boundaries. Potsdam in Germany has all of that information on planetary boundaries. We've done lots of shows on it. Industry executives shouldn't be allowed to lead these agencies because it's corrupt. It's corruption, conflict of interest. It's awful. I think it's awful. Yep. So there was one misrepresentation, and there's his name is between the warming and the extremes, lead author of the relevant IPC sections about Wright's claim that there's no increase in frequency or intensity of hurricanes, droughts, or floods. That's called attribution science, and there's a lot of it going on, although it's not going to happen in the United States, unfortunately. We are an anti-science nation now, but it's easy to show. It's all there. It's all there. And this was in response to Wright citing IPCC work, but claiming extremes are not increasing, which they are. What did we see in North Carolina? What have we seen all over the world? What have we seen? And then he says, okay, here's another one with him. The cold weather versus hot weather mortality claims. And he said global deaths from extreme heat are offset by decreased deaths from extreme cold. He's so full of shit. He really is. Antonio Gasparini was the lead author on one of the studies that Wright cited. And he said his comments, they totally reflect a misconception of his findings and overlook his subsequent work showing that climate change has the potential to produce a substantial increase in temperature-related mortality. I don't have the figures in front of my face, but it's a lot. It could be in the millions. So he seriously misuses the research, and that was James Ray from the University of St. Andrews about how the report interprets his work. And also Suk-Young Lee from Penn State, same thing. So Wright is just full of shit. He's really full of shit. So I'm going to pull up a video. First, I'm going to pull up this, okay? 2024 was the planet's warmest year in recorded history. Global land and ocean surface temperature anomalies in degrees Celsius compared to the 1901 to 2000 average. Up. Now, in 2024, it says 1.29, but we have gone past the 1.6C, and Elliot talks about it, and so all of the scientists do. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to play a clip from a show I did with Professor Elliot Jacobson, who is a statistical genius, mathematician, and who has taken on climate and doing the data for what we need to understand and what we need to look at. So let's watch Elliot and myself talk about CO2. Let's go. Let's start with the Mauna Loa, the CO2. Let's start with this one. So atmospheric, because we're worried about losing this observatory. And this is a very common, we've used this year to year, this particular one. I've used it in many of my videos. But for the layperson that might be the audience or somebody that needs a primer or a refresher, let's go.
So this is just showing you the measurements that are made at the Mauna Loa Observatory of atmospheric CO2 levels measured in parts per million. The first reading was taken in March of 1958, and I think this it shows it was below.
Oh no, it's not mine. No, he
Am
okay,
I
Elliot.
frozen? Are you frozen?
No, I'm fine. You're
Can
back.
people still hear us? Do we know?
You're back.
Must be
You're
frozen
back.
for everyone.
You're back.
No, he
you're
was back.
You're back.
I didn't
It's
clip
okay.
this.
It's
Oh,
okay. I
sorry.
can hear you.
All right.
So
Well,
go ahead. You ended where
Yeah.
you were talking about.
So so the CO2 has been measured every month since March of '58, and I think the first measurement was below 320 parts per million, and the latest ones are up over 430 parts per million. You can see a little seasonal cycle in the data, and the idea is that during the summer, when there's more in the northern hemisphere, there's a lot more plant life, and so it's absorbing CO2, and so the CO2 tends to drop a little bit. During the winter months, when the northern hemisphere doesn't have the active respiration from plant life, we go up a little bit. And this has been consistently going up, and it is not an exponential curve in the least. I don't want anybody to say it's exponential. That's it's not exponential. And one of the things I've tried to do is to sort of show details of this curve, explain this curve in ways that other people haven't really thought about. And so if you could put up like that 12-month curve that I gave you right at the beginning, I will explain so this curve right here, and it might be a little bit hard for people to.
Would you like me to make it bigger? I sure can. No, I can. I'll cover us, and we can talk about this.
Hi, everyone. Over here. There you are. What this actually does is I take the 12-month running average, and I've just taken that, every year since March of 1961 was the first time you could get a 12-month running average, right? And so I take the 12-month running average for every single month, and then I say, well, how much has that changed from the 12-month running average from a year earlier? So this is sort of how fast the 12-month running averages are growing. And what you want to notice, other than the gradual trend up, is that right there in 2024, you see that peak that happened? We had the fastest rate of CO2 growth ever in this last year, just a few months back. We hit that peak. Now it's come down a bit since then, but you would have read in the news that CO2 hit its fastest rate of growth ever. And that is really startling to see that. You can see that right in that data point, that CO2 gained over 4 parts per million. I think it's actually was about 4.4 something in that 12-month running average. And, that goes back, if you look back into the 1960s, we were only going up by about 1 part per million or so per year. So that really tells you that nothing is improving. When we're hitting these new peaks, it means that we are not making, genuine progress.
And it's only going to get worse now with this Chris Wright. I don't know. What kind of turd is Chris Wright? Throw out a name for him in the chat if you agree. But that's Elliot. Elliot is with us in the chat. So I'm really happy that you're here, Elliot. This is great. Professor Elliot Jacobson, Climate Casino, does wonderful work. He's definitely, he's the graph master. Go on Bluesky, go on X, and now Facebook, and he updates every single day. Okay. And I do have another video to show you on CO2, but I just wanted to talk a little bit more about wait a minute, I'm looking for my, okay. So there was that new, the new paper, which had so many problems. They found a lot of errors. They said, estimating that rising carbon dioxide could be a net benefit to U.S. agriculture, but neglecting to mention the negative impacts of more heat and climate change fuel extreme weather events on crops. The DOE, that new report put out by the Orange Turd administration, also states that there is no evidence of more intense meteorological drought in the U.S. or globally, but higher temperature and more evaporation, not just low rainfall. It can lead to and exacerbate droughts. We are seeing all of these examples all over the world. And Alex Hale, Chris Wright, compost. Chris Wright, compost. CWC. All right. So anyway, that's pretty cool. Let me get to my notes. I have more notes on. Yeah, he does not want to roll back anything on fracking. He does not. He says, okay, these are his core arguments on fracking, which then burning, more emissions, energy reliability, affordability, and security. Fracking gives access to large amounts of natural gas, which he argues is more controllable and less intermittent than solar or wind, and helps avoid supply vulnerabilities. Of course, not talking about storage again. Obviously, Texas likes it. Economic and practical benefits. Claims include the job creation. Okay, energy independence. They love to say energy independence. They love that term. And yeah, okay, lower costs, enabling technologies, but these are awful technologies, these fracking technologies. We don't want fracking in New York State. It's a big fight here. We won against the Northern Access Pipeline, which wanted to take fracked gas from Pennsylvania. And again, I talk about this eminent domain, take farmers' properties, take my friend's property, put the pipelines through, go under the Niagara River, go up to Canada and sell it on the market, but just destroy our area. He says, so he acknowledges some of the environmental concerns. He says, okay, now get this one, there are greener selections for fracking chemicals. Attempts to reduce emissions from equipment using natural gas instead of diesel for powering the fracking shit. Noise, dust controls, a quiet fleet, infrastructure, all the bullshit. And like they say, okay, so fracking is the Republicans, well, now it's MAGA. I don't even know if you can call them Republicans anymore. He says it's part of the broader energy strategy. Stepping stone. But if he doesn't like anything, but he does talk about geothermal, which is actually very interesting technology, which I'm not prepared to talk about here. Yet there's a lot. Scientists and environmentalists and policy analysts, they raise serious concerns. Methane leaks, water contamination, environmental damage. Critics, they suggest that Wright's claims, they understate, they gloss over all this stuff. He doesn't talk about that because they're talking about money all the time. If you see more of the stuff that I saw, he talks all about money. It's all about money for these people. They don't give a rat's ass about the environment. They don't even know what overshoot is, probably. And if they do, they've never really read much about it. And regulation weakening. So they're going to reduce permitting for other types of energies that, like I said, sort of green, but it's very hard for me because I know that it's a lot of greenwashing, but then it's what would you rather have? Knowing the science, knowing the reality we're living in. And anyway, greenwashing. Some argue that his efforts to present greener fracking is a bunch, it's bullshit. It's just bullshit. And the global emissions of everything. It's just bullshit. Now, what I'm going to do is I want to talk about I want to play the video on the CO2. And then I want to come back and I want to talk about why or who voted for him. Who voted for him to get in? And I think Trump gets a lot of his information from this guy. He really does. but he's misleading. He says that they can't power the grid, that renewables can't totally power the grid, but there are studies, the DOE, the NREL, the IEA show that wind, solar, and storage can do it. And like I said, up front, it's probably horrible getting the minerals. And there's another thing, the minerals. This administration sits there and says it's a hoax, it's a scam, the green energy scam. But boy, they want to go to these other countries and they want to take their minerals, don't they? And it's not just minerals for data centers and computing. They're full of it. The U.S. Department of Energy's NREL, Renewable Future Study, found that 80 to 90% of renewables is technically feasible and reliable with current technology. Countries like Denmark have 70% wind, Portugal's got 60% renewables, and Spain run largely, they have large shares of their grids on renewables without blackouts. And what did I say before? He ignores storage, demand response, and transmission. He doesn't talk about it. And then he talks about the expense. And I will agree with renewables, they harm the environment, because they do. Everything harms the environment. You're not going to get away from it. I'm sorry, but we have to make the choices, the difficult choices, if we are staying in an industrialized civilization, which we are. For how long? For how long can we go like this? That's why I call them the near-term human extinction, Chris Wright and Lee Zeldin, near-term human extinction cabinet members. Here's my note. It was air pollution kills 8 million people annually worldwide. Sit behind a school bus. You want to go home and feel like you're dying. And then he says the energy transition isn't going to happen. You can't stop these tech people. They're going to do it. No matter how we feel, no matter how much of a doomer I might say I am or whatever, it's going to happen. 2023, 570 billion went to renewables versus 170 billion to fossil fuels. I mean, these are statistics. They're out there. They're out there. And then he says they'll make life worse for ordinary people. Not for me, not with my battery, not when the power goes out and it doesn't stink and I don't have to use anything that smells and makes noise or anything. You can't even have a generator in the house. And the jobs, they scream about jobs. Well, there's jobs. And now they're going to stop that progress in jobs in the green energy field. So he's full of shit. He misrepresents so much. And of course, again, I could say those fossil fuel industry ties. He's just full of it. He's full of it. So before I get to the votes, let me play this on CO2. I've got 10 minutes. This is really, really good. Let's watch this.
I often see human-induced climate change skeptics arguing the fallacy that more CO2, or carbon dioxide, is good for humans. They point to carbon dioxide being a component of photosynthesis, so it's plant food, which is like arguing humans need water, therefore drowning is good. But of course, if we're going to assess whether the impact of more CO2 is good or bad overall, we need to look at the whole picture. So let's do that now. First, their argument, then the rebuttal.
Plants love, they grow better with more carbon dioxide, and you can see the greening of the earth already.
They claim the planet has greened due to CO2 fertilization. Greenhouses add extra CO2, so therefore more CO2 is good for humans. But here is what they leave out. CO2 is not the only limiting factor that has an effect on plants. And they leave out that CO2 has multiple negative effects on the other requirements of plants, and that while inside a greenhouse you can control external damaging factors to some degree, outside the greenhouse it's almost impossible. Okay, now for the full rebuttal. The CO2 fertilization effect is temporary. The effect drops rapidly the more you add. It's easy to confuse growth due to the use of artificial fertilizers or irrigation with CO2 fertilisation. CO2 fertilisation benefits weeds and some non-crop plants first, so these end up competing more heavily with the plants we actually want to eat, the net effect being more herbicide use by farmers. In fact, at the same time as temporary greening was observed in non-crop plants, we've seen a slowdown in global crop production as our crops struggle in an unstable climate, especially as we get more frequent climate shocks. The USDA has pointed this out multiple times. CO2 also raises the global temperature, which dries out soils faster and puts plants and agricultural workers under heat stress, which costs farmers and increases food prices. Higher temperatures can extend the growing season, but this also helps pests and diseases, which have a high cost to fight against, and increases water use, which makes summer droughts more likely. In addition to the increase in food waste, as food goes off faster in higher temperatures. When temperatures are raised, it means more water vapour in the atmosphere, so when it does eventually rain, you get extreme precipitation, which washes away soils or floods crops, which can cause the rotting of their roots. All our domestic plants were bred in lower CO2 levels than today, and they have evolved over the past 100,000 years to be optimised to lower temperatures and CO2 than we have currently, which helps explain why CO2 is still rising. Plants simply cannot use all the additional CO2 from the burning of fossil fuels. If they really needed more, then it would not be rising as fast as it is. Not to mention that in general, evolution cannot keep up with the current rapid rate of change caused by burning of fossil fuels. Some crops, such as maize or corn, don't benefit from additional CO2, as they already concentrate CO2 via their specialist photosynthetic pathways. Most plants, the C3 plants, suffer from damaging photorespiration in higher temperatures, where they use up vital glucose supplies. Both wheat and corn grow best in temperate locations, not hot ones. Plants given extra CO2 take up less minerals per kilogram of food produced, so you end up with lower quality food. Higher temperatures means higher sea level, which inundates fertile river deltas with saltwater, damaging soils and land plants. Rapid shifts in climate mean that pollinators become out of sync with crops that they are supposed to pollinate. And lastly, global hunger started increasing before the COVID-19 pandemic. Clearly, we aren't growing enough food, and climate change makes that harder. Okay, you get the idea. Focusing on one dubious benefit while ignoring the significantly greater downsides is highly misleading. So if you see someone saying,
they grow better with more carbon dioxide,
show them this video.
There you go. Show them that video. And I will have the links in the show notes on my page. Now, it's funny. I looked at how many people are watching. And it's interesting because what did I call this? Chris Wright, the U.S. Department of Energy Fracker in chief. But this is a climate, environment, political show, right? And definitely the views are down because people, their eyes glaze over. It's the least amount of viewed stuff anymore. It's not in the algorithm. People are, because of this administration, it's being ignored. It is climate and overshoot are the overarching issues of our time. They are going to lead an unlivable climate, going up in CO2, going up in heat. It's going to lead to catastrophe. It's already happening. Now, I haven't included anything on the Arctic, although I could, but that's another show. And if I do an Arctic show here on this space, I'm definitely bringing in an Arctic ice specialist with me, or possibly Antarctic ice, because ice is a big issue. What goes on in the Arctic doesn't stay in the Arctic. And it's really very, very sad. And I see this Polish redneck in my chat. Your arguments are ridiculous. Canada is not going to fail or fall. It's not going to join the USA. You've bought and drank the MAGA Kool-Aid. I don't even want you to come back. Why would you come back to this channel? We're trying to teach you, and all you want to do is argue with your bullshit. So I'm sorry, but I guess it was the title of the show. So I've got 3 minutes, and I want to thank everybody. I want to thank Looney, and I want to thank Bella for moderating. Thank you so much. I hope you got something out of this. Christopher Wright is a piece of shit. And I don't like him. And really, he is deranged. You know, he says wind turbines suck the life out of air. He believes fossil fuels are God's chosen energy source. These are things he said. He bulldozed renewable green grants to boost fracking firms. He permitted drilling near tribal lands without consent. He lied about feasibility of nuclear fusion breakthroughs to distract from budget cuts. He covers for pipeline leaks with fake press releases. He denied climate change while quietly investing in seawall contractors, sabotaged interstate EV charging network rollout, ignored all scientific advisors, not handpicked by oil lobbyists, posed as tech neutral. And I don't have time to go over the Democrats really quickly, but I'm sorry, I don't. I have 2 minutes. I'll just go over why would these people vote for him. Michael Bennett, John Hickenlooper, Martin Heinrich, Ben Ray, Lujan, New Mexico, Ruben Gallego, Maggie Hassan, and Jean Shaheen, and Angus King. Why? Why did they? I mean, I have a whole bunch of stuff. I don't have enough time, likely because they have concerns. They have maybe they have fossil fuel industry ties. Maybe Colorado's a big fracking state. I really wanted to do that, but again, I ran out of time. I'm not happy about it. But basically, Chris Wright, he's a fracking executive who's been downplaying the climate problem for years. And I have 1 minute left. I want to thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Johnny. Thank you to my members. And Saturday night, we do have a show with Jim Massa, oceanographer out of Alaska. Saturday night, 9 p.m. Eastern, we will be discussing some new research out on, again, oceans, AMOC. And so please come to Saturday night show on Environmental Coffeehouse. I will be back Tuesday night with Scott, the End of the World Party. Tuesday night is a supportive show. We're going to talk about how to deal with the stress of what we're living through. We're going to talk about our anxiety. We're going to talk about the togetherness. We're going to talk about what we feel, and our chat, which is a beautiful chat, the followers of this channel and this space, this amazing cooperative of progressive voices. And I'm probably one of the only climate voices. We have to make climate front and center again. The environmental issues are so critical. We don't want to go extinct. And we're going there. Unfortunately, all species are going to go with us. Peace out.